Howdy guys, my name is Jason and here we have JB Rogers and welcome to the part one of the Ultimate Drifter's Guide. I just want to say a massive thank you to Winton Raceway for letting us use this amazing venue to put on this 5-part course. If you want to check out what they've got on, check out their website down below. They have V8 supercars, drift days, test and tune days, the lot, so check it out. If you don't know what Keep a Read is, we are all about keeping drifting off the street and on the track. So we put on drift days, competitions, and we do car giveaways. But today we're putting on this drift school course, which is a step-by-step on all the basics on how to draft. So between Josh and I, we've got 20 years experience in drifting. And what we're gonna do is we've got this 5-part series that goes through all the basics of draft. Starting with the car you will need, donuts, figure eights, entries, and then finishing on tandems. If you want to see all these videos, follow the playlist and check them all out, and you'll be a professional by the end of it. We'll also be throwing the cameraman, Tom Shepard, in the car for his first time experience after we finish the course to see how he goes. Let's get into it.
Alrighty, so we're back at the Kangang factory because the weather was quite terrible at Winton, and we're going to go through a little bit about our AU Drift Ute. So you may be asking yourself, where do I start? What car do I get? So the main essential parts for a drift car are the fact that they are rear-wheel drive, and you would preferably have a manual transmission. You can do this with an auto transmission, but end game, you really do want a manual. So what are some good cars to drift with? Well, we've got the AU Falcon, which is gaining a lot of popularity in Australia at the moment, but some other ones would be the R31 Skyline, any Skyline for that matter, 350Zs, 370Zs, Silvias, all those kind of cars. Anything really essentially with a rear-wheel drive, manual transmission is a good place to start. So we're going to go around the AU Falcon and show you some of the essentials you need to build your first drift car. Alrighty, first things first, the rear end of the Drift Ute, that ass you might say. We're going to go through the diff and the suspension of this vehicle. So it is very important, probably the most important part of any drift car is the diff. It is important that both of your wheels turn at the same speed. So this vehicle has a spool. The other option to a spool, it might be a weldie. I like weldies, the most common way of making sure your diff is locked. There are other options on the market, such as 2-way diffs and 1.5-way diffs, but they are very expensive. So I suggest you start out with a weldie or a spool. Weldie's a lot easier. Pay your mate a slab just to weld that ass and off you go. As far as suspension, the main goal of a drift vehicle, is to have a nice stiff suspension. What that allows the vehicle to do is be predictable between transitions. If you have standard suspension, the car can be very floaty and boaty. So what that means is when you are transitioning between your drifts, it's very unpredictable. Stiff suspension makes that stuff nice and predictable. We're moving on to tyres. Now, as starting out drift, back in my day, back in Jason's day, we used to go down to the local tyre power, hit them up if they had some scrappies. Often what happens when you take your car there, they'll change 2 tyres because they're knackered and they've got 2 good ones. So you might be able to get yourself a hookup. It's a good place to start. Basically free tyres. You take them off their hands, they don't have to get rid of them. You can run them on the back for a couple laps, get you started, keep it nice and cheap. But if you want to go down the route of purchasing tyres, we run the Rodex, or used to be called the Jin Yu tyre on the rear of this ute. This tyre is about $70. You probably don't want to be spending any more than $70 when you're starting out, otherwise it just starts to snowball and get expensive. The aim of the game here is to keep it nice and cheap while you're learning. Something else we'll do with these tyres is, no matter what we're running, a scrappy or a new tyre, we'll bump the pressure up to around 50 PSI. What that allows you to do is get nice and comfortable. Last thing you want the car to be too grippy when you're learning and you're starting out. As you progress, you can start to lower that pressure down to your 30 mark or even a little bit lower, depending on how you're progressing. But to start out with, very important, you run these at about 50 PSI. All right, moving from the rear of the vehicle to the front of the vehicle. As I mentioned earlier, we're keeping the setup nice and stiff. That means we've got some coilovers in the front. Plenty of cheap alternatives online for coilovers. Obviously, you can go your BCs or up. Shockworks, one of our favourite coilovers in-house, but you can keep it simple. Plenty on eBay to start out with. Moving down to the steering. In this vehicle, we have an AU House front lock kit. What that basically means is a vehicle comes out with a certain amount of angle on the steering. We've put a kit in this car to allow us to go a little bit further, meaning we've got a little bit more to stretch when we go sideways. Just because we have this kit does not mean that I advise that everyone gets this kit though. It is a common mistake that people go and fill their cars with lock kits and they don't know how to maximize their standard setup before they start. So I would advise you use your standard stuff, get used to it. Once you progress down the line, then you can start looking at this fancy extra lock. So what's under the AU Falcon's hood? Oh, she's standard. You know why? Because you don't need to do anything to your motor to drift. Keep it simple, keep it stock, just like our lock kit. Don't do anything. Save your money, put it back into tyres and get out on the track. The inside of the mighty AU. There's a fair few creature comforts in this vehicle. We just put these seats, steering wheel, stuff in the car, so a lot of our drift school guys are nice and locked in and comfy when they're in the car and they feel like they're driving, you know, a proper race car. One of the most important things about the inside of this vehicle is that the handbrake works. It's not necessarily crucial to be able to drift, but I like to have a solid handbrake. You know, you can learn the methods around handbrake entries and, you know, it helps you bail out sometimes. So as far as seats go, when I first started, I didn't have seats in my car for about 2 years. What this seat allows you to do, I mean, in my car, I was holding myself up. I'd have my leg against the trans tunnel, trying not to slide around too much. What a nice, good bucket seat does, nice and sturdy. As you can see, she's not going anywhere. It locks you in place. Allows you to concentrate on more important things like hands on the steering wheel, gear changes, and handbrake pulls. The steering wheel is definitely a creature comfort, but again, a nice clean steering wheel you can have a grasp on is pretty important in a drift car. And they look gangster. I mean, have a look at the seats. Cheeky, narty, can't go wrong. Alrighty, so that's it guys. Simple setup, the AU Drift Ute. Remember, the most important part of this guide is to keep it simple and less is more. Simple diff, simple suspension, standard motor, doll the interior up a bit if you want to. Don't be filling your cart full of unnecessary crap. Learn to use what you've got first and then buy the fun parts. So we're gonna head back to Winton to teach you guys how to drift.
Oh, well, that's it for your basic setup drift car and the end of part 1 of the Ultimate Drafter's Guide. Got to keep following. Part 2 we've got coming up, how to do a donut involving clutch kicks, powering over and all that goodness. Hope you enjoyed the part 1. Make sure you chuck a comment down below of what you think, like the video and subscribe to our channel. Follow the next video up here and the playlist will be down below. Check it out. We'll see you next time.